Welcome back to Mr. Midnight. Look, I've covered a lot of horror stories on this channel, but these 8 from Alaska, they hit different. We're talking about regular people, delivery drivers, store clerks, postal workers, just doing their jobs when something goes completely wrong. And I'm not talking about bears or getting lost in a snowstorm. I mean, something else. There's this one about an Uber driver who picked up passengers that paid with money from $1,995. Another about a hotel manager who had to trust a 7-foot creature with red eyes to save her guests. Sounds crazy, right? But here's the thing, these people reported this stuff. To police, to their bosses, to anyone who'd listen. 8 stories. 8 nights in Alaska that people can't explain and won't forget. Some of these workers quit their jobs the next day and never went back. If you're new here, I'm Mr. Midnight, and I dig up the horror stories that actually happened. Subscribe if you want more, hit the bell, you know the drill. Alright, let's get into it. Story number 1 starts with a simple pizza delivery on Valentine's Day. Should have been an easy $40. Instead, well, you'll see. My name is Danny Rodriguez, and I delivered pizza in Anchorage for 3 years before everything changed. I know that doesn't sound scary, but when you're driving alone through Alaska's worst neighborhoods at 2 a.m., carrying hot food and cash, you learn real fear pretty quick. I've had knives pulled on me, been followed by creeps, and delivered to crack houses where the windows were all boarded up. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened on Valentine's Day weekend in 2020. I was 24, working nights to pay for community college. My parents came here from Mexico when I was little, looking for work on the fishing boats. Dad got hurt his second season. A winch cable snapped and nearly took his arm off. After that, it was just Mom cleaning hotel rooms and me trying to scrape together enough money to maybe become an engineer someday. Tony's Pizza was the only place that hired me without asking too many questions about my ID. The pay was garbage, $8 an hour plus tips. But weekend nights could be good money if you were willing to drive anywhere, no matter how sketchy. I was always willing. My car was a piece of junk. A 2009 Honda Civic with 280,000 miles, duct-taped seats, and a heater that only worked when it felt like it. The pizza car topper was held on with bungee cords because the magnetic base had cracked. Every time I hit a pothole, which was constantly in Anchorage, the whole thing would rattle like it was going to fly off. The smell never came out. Pepperoni grease, garlic powder, and that weird chemical smell from Tony's special sauce had soaked into everything. My clothes, my hair, the fabric seats. My roommates always knew when I got home from work, even if I showered immediately. That smell followed me everywhere. But I needed the money. I was behind on rent, behind on my car payment, behind on everything. My share was $425 a month for a mattress on the floor of a living room I shared with 2 other guys. If I didn't make $300 in tips that weekend, I'd be sleeping in my car. Again, February 15th was a Saturday, Valentine's weekend. The biggest tip night of the year because everyone was either celebrating with their girlfriend or drowning their sorrows in pizza and beer. I'd been working since 5 p.m. and had already made about $180 in tips when Tony got the last order of the night. "One more, Danny," he called from behind the register. "Then you can go home and count your money." The order was simple. 1 large supreme pizza, extra cheese, going to 1247 Birch Street. The customer had already paid by credit card and left a $5 tip online, but I was hoping for a few more bucks in cash. Rich neighborhood meant good tips, usually. That's when the weather turned. I've lived in Alaska my whole life, so I know how fast a clear night can become a nightmare. But this was different. At exactly 11:30 p.m., while I was loading the pizza into my insulated bag, the wind just stopped. Complete silence. No traffic noise, no distant airplanes, nothing. Even Tony stopped talking. Then the snow started. Not normal snow. This came down like someone had torn open the sky and dumped it all at once. Within 30 seconds, I couldn't see Tony's neon sign from the parking lot 20 feet away. "Jesus Christ," Tony muttered, squinting through the window. "Maybe you should wait this out," but I was already putting on my coat. "It's just snow, Tony, and this is my last delivery. I'll be fine." I should have stayed. I should have listened to that little voice in my head that was screaming something was wrong. Instead, I walked out into what felt like the end of the world. The cold hit me like a punch. Not normal cold. The kind that cuts right through your jacket and makes your bones ache. My breath turned to ice crystals before it left my mouth, and my eyes started watering so hard I could barely see. The wind had started up again, howling like something alive and angry. I couldn't see my car until I was standing right next to it. 3 inches of snow had already piled up on the hood, and my windshield was completely covered. I started the engine and turned the heat to full blast, but only cold air came out. The heater had finally given up. My GPS worked fine until I got about halfway to Birch Street. The screen flickered once, then went black. I unplugged it and plugged it back in, but nothing happened. Even weirder, my phone wasn't getting any signal. No bars, no data, nothing. Like every satellite in the sky had just disappeared. Without GPS, I had to navigate by memory and street signs. But the snow was coming down so hard I could barely see 5 feet ahead. My headlights just reflected off the snow, making everything worse. I was driving maybe 10 miles per hour, stopping at every intersection to try to read the street signs. That's when I noticed something was wrong with the pizza. The insulated bag was sitting on the passenger seat, and I could smell it: pepperoni, cheese, that familiar Tony's Pizza smell. But underneath it was something else. Something sweet and rotten, like meat left in the sun too long. I figured maybe the pizza had gotten contaminated or something. I'd dealt with worse. I found Birch Street after driving around for about 20 minutes. My hands were cramping from gripping the steering wheel, and I could barely feel my toes in my boots. The snow was getting deeper, and my little Honda was sliding on every turn. 1247 Birch Street should have been a nice house in an expensive neighborhood. Instead, I found something that made my skin crawl. The house was dark, not just lights off dark, but empty dark, like nobody had lived there for years. The yard was overgrown with dead grass poking through the snow, and the driveway hadn't been plowed, ever. There were no tire tracks, no footprints, no signs of life anywhere. But the address was right there on the mailbox: 1247. The paint was peeling and the numbers were faded, but it was definitely the right place. I grabbed the pizza and my flashlight and walked up to the front door. Each step through the snow felt wrong, like I was walking on something that wasn't quite solid. The wooden steps creaked under my weight, and I noticed the paint on the door was peeling so badly it looked like diseased skin. I knocked 3 times and waited. Nothing. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. I was about to leave when I heard footsteps inside. Slow, shuffling footsteps, like someone old or sick trying to walk. The door opened, and an elderly woman stood there smiling at me. She was maybe 70, wearing a floral dress that looked like something from my grandmother's closet in the 1980 seconds. Her gray hair was perfectly styled, and she had kind eyes that crinkled when she smiled. "Oh, wonderful," she said. "You made it through the storm. Come in, you must be freezing." Everything about her seemed normal, except for one thing: she wasn't cold. I was shivering so hard I could barely hold the pizza bag, but she was standing in the doorway in just that thin dress like it was a summer evening. "I've got your pizza," I said through chattering teeth. "1 large supreme, extra cheese." "Yes, of course," she said, reaching into an old leather purse. "Let me get you something extra for driving through this terrible weather." She handed me a $20 bill. A great tip, but when I looked at it more closely, something was wrong. The bill looked old, really old, but also new, like it had just come from the bank, except it said Series 1985 in the corner. "Ma'am," I said, "I think this bill might be." But she'd already closed the door. I stood there on her porch, looking at the 20 under my flashlight. It wasn't just old money, it was crisp and new, with no wear marks or creases. Like someone had saved it for 35 years, just to tip a pizza guy. Through the door, I could hear an old television playing. The announcer was talking about President Reagan and something about the Soviet Union, which was weird, because Reagan had been dead since 2004. I tried to leave through the front door, but when I opened it, something impossible was on the other side. Instead of the blizzard I'd walked through 10 minutes ago, there was bright sunlight, green grass, birds singing, warm air that smelled like spring flowers. No snow anywhere, not a single flake. I slammed the door shut and tried again. Same thing. Warm spring day, sunshine, no storm. But when I looked through the window next to the door, I could see my car covered in snow and the blizzard still raging. That's when the fear really started. I climbed out through the living room window, dropping into the snow outside. My car was exactly where I'd left it, but now there was something else. The snow around my footprints was turning pink. Not rust-colored or brownish like you'd expect from dirt. Pink. Like someone had mixed blood into it. I was walking back to my car when I saw the second house. It was identical to 1247 Birch Street. Same design, same peeling paint, same dying yard. But this one had lights on, Christmas decorations in the windows, and a freshly plowed driveway. Warm yellow light spilled from the windows onto the snow. The mailbox said 1247 Birch Street. I walked up to the front door, mostly just to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind. A middle-aged man answered before I could knock. He was wearing a Christmas sweater and holding a mug of something hot that steamed in the cold air. "Pizza delivery," he said cheerfully. "Perfect timing. We were just saying we hoped you'd make it through the storm." He invited me inside. The house was identical to the first one, but decorated for Christmas. A huge tree in the corner, wrapped presents underneath, stockings hanging over a fireplace where real logs were burning. It smelled like pine needles and hot chocolate. But here's what made my blood turn cold. On the coffee table was a newspaper dated December 23, 2019, 2 months ago. And when I looked more closely, the headlines were about things I remembered from Christmas time, some local politics thing, a store closing down, stuff that had definitely already happened. "Sir," I said carefully, "what date do you think it is?" He laughed like I'd told a joke. "December 23, 2019, of course. Christmas is in 2 days." "Why?" "Because it's February 15th, 2020. He showed me the newspaper again, pointing to the date. "See, December 23rd. Are you feeling all right? You look a little pale." I wasn't pale, I was gray. I could see my reflection in his window, and I looked like a corpse. My lips were blue. My skin was the color of old snow, and there were ice crystals forming in my eyebrows. "One large Supreme, extra cheese," he said, handing me exact change. "And here's a little extra for the road." Another 20. This one said Series 1999. When I left through his front door, it opened to the correct winter night. But now there was a third house, and a fourth, and a fifth. This pattern continued for what felt like hours. Every time I delivered a pizza, another house appeared. Same address, same family, but different years. I delivered to a family in 2015 where the dad was talking about some war on the news. I delivered to a family in 2003 where they had one of those old box televisions and were watching something about Iraq. I delivered to a family in 1987 where the mom paid with coins and the house smelled like cigarettes. But here's what made it truly horrifying. Every family was starving. Not just hungry. Starving. Dying of hunger. The family in 1987 had been sitting around their dinner table with empty plates for 33 years, waiting for their pizza. The dad's cheeks were sunken in, and when he smiled, I could see that half his teeth were missing. The mom's dress hung on her like a scarecrow, and when she reached for her purse, her arm was just skin and bone. "We ordered this so long ago," she whispered, her voice like dry leaves. "We've been so hungry, so hungry." Their kids were worse. 2 little boys, maybe 8 and 10, sitting at the table with their hands folded. They hadn't grown in 33 years. They were still 8 and 10, but their eyes were the eyes of middle-aged men who had spent decades slowly starving to death. "Are you our pizza man?" the younger one asked. His voice cracked like he hadn't used it in years. The family in 2003 had been waiting 17 years. The father had lost so much weight his wedding ring kept falling off his finger. The mother kept putting it back on, over and over, like a nervous tick. Their teenage daughter looked like a skeleton in a prom dress. The family in 2015 had been waiting 5 years, and they were just starting to understand what was happening to them. The mother grabbed my arm when I tried to leave. "Please," she said, and her grip was so tight it left bruises. "We're so hungry. When will the pizza come? When will it finally come?" "You have your pizza," I told her. "I just gave it to you." "But we're still hungry," she said, and when she opened her mouth, I could see that her tongue was black and swollen. "We're always hungry. The pizza never comes. It never comes." That's when I realized the horrible truth. I wasn't delivering pizza to these families. I was delivering the memory of pizza. The smell, the box, the receipt. But the actual food, the thing that could end their hunger, was always just out of reach. They could see it, smell it, even hold the box, but they could never actually eat it. And every time I completed a delivery, another family appeared, trapped in their own year, waiting for food that would never come. By the fifth house, I was seeing other versions of myself. I was walking back to my car when I saw another guy in a Tony's Pizza shirt walking up to a different house. It was me, but driving a different car. A red Honda instead of blue. We stared at each other for a moment across the snow. "How long have you been here?" he called out. "About 2 hours. You?" 6 hours. I've done 18 deliveries, but the street keeps getting longer." We compared notes. He'd been delivering to families from the 1,970 seconds through the 1,990 seconds. I'd been handling 1,990 seconds through 2,010 seconds. Both of us were trapped on this street that kept growing, adding more houses with more starving families for more years. "What happens if we just stop?" I asked. "I tried that," said another voice. We turned around. It was another me, but this one looked terrible. His Tony's Pizza shirt was torn and dirty, and he had dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't slept in weeks. "I've been here for 8 days, he said. "Maybe longer. Time gets weird after a while. The families get angry if you don't deliver. Really angry." "Angry how?" He rolled up his sleeve. His arm was covered in bite marks. Human bite marks, deep ones that had gotten infected and never properly healed. "They're not just hungry for pizza," he said quietly. "They're hungry for everything. Food, warmth, life. And if you don't give them what they want." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. That's when I noticed something else. The snow around us wasn't white anymore. It was pink, then red, then dark red, like old blood. And it wasn't melting. It was getting thicker, stickier, harder to walk through. Every step felt like I was walking through mud made of ice and blood. The temperature was dropping too. My thermometer on my keychain read -40 and falling. My breath wasn't just fogging, it was turning to ice before it left my mouth and falling to the ground with little tinkling sounds. I could feel the cold creeping into my body. First, my fingers and toes went numb. Then my hands and feet. The numbness climbed up my arms and legs like invisible snakes, leaving dead zones where I couldn't feel anything at all. But I couldn't stop delivering. Every time I tried to get in my car and drive away, I'd find myself standing in front of another house with another starving family. Some invisible force was pulling me forward, making me knock on door after door. The families were getting more desperate. In the 1982 house, the father grabbed me by the throat when I tried to leave. "You can't go," he wheezed. His breath smelled like rotting meat. "We've been waiting so long. So long. Just a little longer, please." His wife was behind him, and she wasn't human anymore. Not exactly. She still looked like a woman, but her eyes were completely black and her mouth was too wide. When she smiled, I could see rows and rows of teeth, like a shark. "Stay with us," she said, and her voice was like breaking glass. "Stay and help us eat. We're so very hungry." Their children weren't children. They were things pretending to be children, wearing the faces of kids who had starved to death decades ago. When they moved all wrong, like puppets controlled by someone who had never seen a real person walk. I ran. I ran through snow that was now knee-deep and the color of dried blood. Behind me, I could hear them following. Not just that family, but all of them. Every family I delivered to, pouring out of their houses and chasing me through the storm. They weren't running. They were gliding, moving across the snow without leaving footprints, their faces stretched into impossible smiles. "Pizza," they screamed in unison. "Pizza, pizza, pizza." But they weren't asking for pizza anymore. They were asking for me. I made it to my car and locked the doors, but it didn't matter. The families surrounded the car, pressing their faces against the windows. Up close, I could see that they weren't really there. They were like projections, or memories, or ghosts, but they could still reach through the glass. Cold fingers wrapped around my throat. I couldn't see who they belonged to, but they were real enough. Real enough to squeeze, real enough to kill me. "Join us," whispered the woman from 1,987. "Join us and wait. Wait for the pizza that never comes." The cold was so intense now that my car windows were cracking. Spiderweb fractures spread across the glass as the temperature dropped to levels that shouldn't exist in nature. My breath wasn't fogging anymore. It was freezing solid and falling like snow. I could feel my body shutting down. My heart was slowing, my thoughts getting fuzzy. This is what it feels like to freeze to death, I realized. This is how it ends. But then I remembered something my grandmother used to tell me about surviving in Alaska. The cold only wins if you let it. Fight it with everything you have, Mijo. Fight it with fire. I grabbed my emergency lighter from the glove compartment and set the pizza bag on fire. The effect was immediate and terrible. The families surrounding my car started screaming. Not human screams, but the sound of wind through broken windows. They backed away from the car, their faces twisting into expressions of pure terror. The burning pizza smell filled the air, mixed with something else, something that smelled like burning hair and old meat. As the flames grew higher, the houses around me started to fade. First the ones from the 1,980 seconds, then the 1,990 seconds, then the 2000s. But the families didn't disappear. They just got angrier. "You can't leave," they howled in voices like breaking ice. "We're still hungry. We'll always be hungry." The fire spread from the pizza bag to the seats, then to the dashboard. My car was burning around me, but it was the only thing keeping the ghost families away. I had to choose, burn alive in my car or freeze to death with the hungry ghosts. I chose fire. I sat in that burning car and let the flames lick at my clothes while the temperature outside dropped to -60, -70, temperatures that don't exist anywhere on Earth. The metal of my car was getting so cold it was becoming brittle, cracking and shattering like glass. But the heat from the fire was keeping me alive, just barely. And then, as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The snow stopped falling, the families disappeared, the houses faded away like they had never been there. I was sitting in my car in the middle of an empty lot, surrounded by the normal winter night of Anchorage. My car wasn't on fire. The pizza bag wasn't burned. Everything was exactly as it had been when I first arrived, except for one thing. There was no 1247 Birch Street. There was no house at all, just an empty lot with a for sale sign that looked like it had been there for years. Snow had piled up around it, and the wooden stake was rotted and falling over. I got out of my car and walked over to the sign. In small letters at the bottom, almost too faded to read, it said, "Lot cleared 1,987 after house fire. Family of 4 deceased." My hands were shaking as I got back in my car, not from cold this time, from pure terror. I drove back to Tony's Pizza, and everything was normal. The lights were on, the door was unlocked, and Tony was still behind the counter counting the till. "How'd it go?" he asked without looking up. I didn't answer. I just reached into my delivery bag and pulled out all the money I'd collected that night. Not just the tips I'd earned from regular customers, but the old bills from the ghost families. Bills from 1,985, 1,987, 1,999, 2003. All of them crisp and new, like they'd just come from a bank that printed money in the past. When I counted it all, it was over $1,200, more money than I'd ever seen at once. "Jesus, Danny," Tony said, looking at the pile of cash. "What kind of tips were people giving tonight?" I never told him the truth. How could I? Instead, I said, people were feeling generous because of the storm, and he believed me because sometimes rich people really do tip big when the weather's bad. I used that money to pay for my entire spring semester at community college. Every time I spent one of those old bills, I wondered if some cashier would notice the dates. But nobody ever did. Old money still spends, I guess. I quit delivering pizza the next day, told Tony I was focusing on school, which was true enough. But the real reason was simpler. I couldn't drive at night anymore. Every time I saw snow, every time I saw an empty lot, every time I smelled pizza, I remembered those families. Still sitting at their tables, still waiting for food that would never come. I'm studying mechanical engineering now at UAA. I have a nice apartment, a reliable car, and a part-time job at a bookstore that closes at 6 p.m. sharp. I never work nights, I never drive in storms, and I haven't ordered pizza delivery since 2020. But sometimes, on really cold winter nights, when the wind is howling and the snow is coming down hard, I look out my window and wonder about those families. Are they still out there somewhere, sitting in houses that exist between seconds, waiting for the pizza man who never comes? And sometimes, very late at night, when I'm lying in bed trying to sleep, I can swear I hear them calling. Pizza, pizza, pizza. Getting closer every time. I used to think Alaska's winters were dangerous because of the cold, or the isolation, or the darkness. Now I know the real danger is different. The real danger is that sometimes, when people need something badly enough for long enough, that need becomes a kind of gravity. It creates places where time gets stuck, where the living and the dead exist in the same space, all of them hungry for things they can never have. The medical examiner's report was in the newspaper a few weeks later. A small article buried in the back pages. Family of 4 found dead in house fire, 1247 Birch Street, the 14th of February 1987. Cause of death, smoke inhalation. Bodies discovered after neighbors reported smell. February 14th. The night before my delivery. They'd been waiting 33 years for their Valentine's Day pizza, and I finally brought it to them. But here's the thing that keeps me awake at night. I never found out what happened to the other delivery drivers. The other versions of me who were trapped on that street. Are they still there, driving through endless snow, delivering pizza to families who died decades ago? Sometimes I think I see them. Late at night, when I'm driving home from work, I'll catch a glimpse of a red Honda with a pizza car topper in my rearview mirror. Just for a second, just long enough to see the driver's face. It's always me. Always another Danny Rodriguez, trapped forever in the moment between life and death, between hunger and satisfaction, between the warm inside of a pizza shop and the infinite cold of an Alaskan winter. I've been thinking about going back to 1247 Birch Street, just to see, just to know for sure. But I'm scared of what I might find there. Or worse, I'm scared that I might never come back. My name is Maria Santos, and I've been working gas stations for 8 years now. Started when I got out of the army, needed something steady while I figured out civilian life. Most people think pumping gas is easy work, but when you're the only person for 40 miles in any direction, things get complicated fast. I've handled drunk truckers, stranded families, and more than my share of emergencies. But what happened last March, at my station on the Parks Highway, changed everything I thought I knew about working alone in the Alaska wilderness. I run the Tesoro station at mile marker 187 on the Parks Highway. It's not much to look at, just 4 pumps, a convenience store, and a small repair bay. But for truckers and travelers heading between Anchorage and Fairbanks, we're the only fuel stop for 40 miles either way. The job means long shifts alone, especially nights. Most people wouldn't last a week out here, but I grew up in rural Alaska. The isolation doesn't bother me. At least, it didn't used to. The station operates 24 hours, which means someone has to be there all the time. During winter months, that someone is usually me. The owner lives in Anchorage and only visits during summer. I've got living quarters attached to the back of the store. Nothing fancy, just a bed, kitchenette, and bathroom. The setup works fine for a single person who doesn't mind the quiet. My military background helps with the job. 6 years in the Army taught me to stay calm under pressure and handle myself if things go wrong. I keep a shotgun behind the counter, mostly for bears, but Alaska has all kinds of wildlife. The state requires remote stations to have emergency supplies and communication equipment. We've got a CB radio, landline phone, and satellite internet when the weather's good. March 15th started like any normal day. Temperature was around 15 below, pretty typical for that time of year. I'd been tracking a storm system on the weather radio, but the forecasters said it wouldn't hit until late afternoon. By lunch, though, the wind was picking up, and snow was starting to fall harder than predicted. Around 2 in the afternoon, the first customers started arriving. A family in an SUV pulled up, mom, dad, and 2 young kids. Their vehicle was making grinding noises, and steam was coming from under the hood. Behind them came a big rig driven by Tom Mitchell, a regular customer who runs freight between Anchorage and Fairbanks twice a week. Engine's overheating, the father told me, pointing at his SUV. Temperature gauge is redlining. I checked under the hood. The radiator was leaking coolant, probably cracked from the cold. "You're not going anywhere in this," I told him. "I can patch it temporarily, but you'll need a real mechanic." Tom walked over while I was explaining the situation. "Storm's getting worse out there," he said. "Radio's calling for complete whiteout conditions by evening. Looks like we might all be stuck here for a while." Over the next few hours, more vehicles arrived. An elderly couple in a sedan, 2 truckers in separate rigs, and a guy on a motorcycle who barely made it before the wind really picked up. By 6 o'clock, the storm had turned into a full blizzard. Visibility dropped to 0, and the temperature was falling fast. Nobody was leaving tonight. I gathered everyone in the store. "Looks like we're having a sleepover," I announced. "I've got emergency supplies and extra blankets. The building's warm and safe. We'll wait out the storm and get everyone moving in the morning." The kids thought it was exciting, like camping indoors. Their parents were worried but grateful for shelter. The truckers had been through worse weather and seemed relaxed. Tom helped me organize sleeping arrangements, while the elderly couple, Harold and Betty, settled into chairs near the coffee machine. Around 8 o'clock, I went outside to check the generators and make sure the fuel pumps were covered. That's when I saw the first tracks. They were in the fresh snow near pump number 3. At first glance, they looked like boot prints, but something was wrong. They were huge, at least 18 inches long and almost as wide. The stride length was incredible, maybe 6 or 7 feet between prints. I'd never seen anything like them. I called Tom over. He's lived in Alaska his whole life and knows about tracking. "What do you make of these?" I asked. Tom examined the prints with his flashlight. His expression changed. "Never seen prints this big," he said quietly. "Strides too long for a person, even a tall one. And look here." He pointed at the toe area. "That's not a boot sole. Those look like toes. Maybe someone in snowshoes?" I suggested, though I didn't really believe it. "Maria," Tom said, keeping his voice low. "I've heard stories from other drivers. Things they've seen on remote highways late at night. Big things. Things that aren't supposed to exist." I didn't want to alarm the other customers, so we went back inside. But I made sure to lock both entrances and turn on all the exterior floodlights. Better safe than sorry. Around 10 o'clock, Jake, the younger trucker, came running in from the bathroom. "Something's wrong with the pumps," he said. "Come look." We went outside together. Pump number 2 was completely destroyed. The metal housing was twisted and bent like someone had attacked it with a sledgehammer. But there were no tool marks, just smooth deformations where incredible force had been applied. The electronic display was shattered, and wires hung loose like torn muscles. "What could do this?" Jake asked. I examined the damage carefully. The metal wasn't cut or struck. It was bent and twisted as if grabbed by massive hands and simply crushed. The pump weighs over 300 pounds and is bolted to a concrete foundation. Whatever did this had incredible strength. "Storm damage?" I suggested weakly. "Maria," Tom said, pointing at the ground around the destroyed pump. "Look at these tracks, fresh ones. Someone was here while we were inside." The prints circled the pump area like a predator studying its prey. They were deeper this time, pressed firmly into the snow. Whoever or whatever made them had stood right here, examining the equipment, learning how it worked. We went back inside and I checked the security monitors. The cameras showed nothing but static during the time frame when the pump was destroyed. Either the storm was interfering with the signal or something was deliberately avoiding detection. I decided not to tell the other customers about the damage yet. No point in causing panic when we were all trapped here together. But I started thinking about defenses. The station had good locks and solid walls, but if something powerful enough to destroy a gas pump wanted inside, locks might not be enough. Around midnight, little Sarah, the family's youngest daughter, woke up screaming, "There's a big hairy man outside," she cried, pointing toward the front windows. "He's watching us." Her mother comforted her. "It's just a nightmare, honey. Go back to sleep." But I noticed that Tom and the other truckers were now alert, looking toward the windows. We all knew that kids sometimes see things adults miss. I dimmed the interior lights and carefully looked outside. The floodlights illuminated maybe 50 feet beyond the building. Past that was solid darkness and falling snow. At first, I didn't see anything unusual. Then, just at the edge of the light, I saw it. A massive figure stood between 2 pine trees, partially hidden in shadow. It was at least 8 feet tall, covered in dark hair or fur. The shape was human-like but wrong somehow. Too broad, too tall, arms too long. It wasn't moving, just standing there watching our building. I blinked and looked again. The figure was gone. "Tom," I whispered, "come here." He joined me at the window. "See anything?" "Maybe." "Stay alert." Over the next hour, the smell started. It was like a zoo mixed with something dead, musky, wild, and threatening. The odor seeped through the building's ventilation system despite the closed doors and windows. Harold complained about the smell, but I blamed it on the storm affecting the septic system. At 2 a.m, the generator died. The building immediately started getting cold. Without power, we had no heat, no lights, and no way to run equipment. I grabbed a flashlight and headed outside to check the generator shed. The shed door was torn completely off its hinges. Inside, the generator looked like it had been attacked by a wild animal. Fuel lines were ripped apart, wiring was torn loose, and deep scratches gouged the metal housing. But these weren't random scratches. They were deliberate, systematic damage, designed to disable the machine completely. "Tom," I called, "bring everyone here, we've got a problem." When the group saw the generator damage, the mood changed completely. This wasn't storm damage or equipment failure. Something intelligent had deliberately sabotaged our power supply. "What are we dealing with here?" Harold asked. Tom looked at the scratch marks on the generator. "Claws made these," he said, "but look at the pattern. Whatever did this understood what it was destroying. This isn't random animal behavior." The temperature inside the building was already dropping. Without heat, we'd start facing hypothermia within a few hours. I had emergency blankets and some portable heaters that ran on propane, but they wouldn't last all night. "Everyone stay together," I announced. "No one goes outside alone. We'll huddle near the center of the store and share body heat." While we were organizing our survival setup, Betty pointed toward the front windows. "What's that moving out there?" Multiple large shapes were moving just beyond our light. They seemed to be circling the building, studying us from different angles. The shapes were too big and moved too smoothly to be human, but they showed clear intelligence in their movements. "How many are there?" Jake asked. "I count at least 3, Tom replied. "Maybe more." That's when the sounds started. Deep, resonant howls echoed through the forest around us. They weren't quite animal sounds, but they weren't human either. The calls seemed to be communicating, passing information between the creatures outside. Sarah started crying again. Her parents held her close, but I could see fear in their eyes now. We all understood that we weren't dealing with a normal situation. The creatures began testing our defenses. Something massive pressed against the front door, causing the frame to creak and bend. The windows vibrated as huge hands or paws pressed against the glass. Each test was methodical, like they were learning about our building's weak points. "They're smart," Tom observed. "Too smart." Around 4 a.m, one of them got onto the roof. Heavy footsteps moved back and forth above us, shaking dust from the ceiling tiles. The creature was walking around up there, apparently studying the roof structure. We could hear scraping sounds as it tested different areas, looking for a way inside. "Maria," Harold whispered, "what are those things?" I didn't have a good answer. In my 8 years working remote Alaska stations, I'd heard stories from truckers and travelers, tales about creatures living deep in the wilderness, things that avoided humans but occasionally interacted with people who entered their territory. Most folks dismissed these stories as imagination or cabin fever, but the evidence was right above our heads. The scraping sounds intensified. Whatever was on the roof had found something interesting near the ventilation system. Metal groaned and bent as massive strength was applied to the roof structure. "It's trying to get inside," Betty said, her voice shaking. I grabbed the shotgun from behind the counter. "Everyone move to the back room," I ordered. Away from the windows and roof access. We huddled in my small living quarters while the sounds above grew more aggressive. The creature had torn through the roof ventilation and was attempting to enlarge the opening. Pieces of ceiling tile fell as something massive tried to squeeze through the roof. Then the sound stopped. For several minutes, we waited in complete silence. The only noise was our nervous breathing and the wind outside. Suddenly, a huge, hairy arm punched through the ceiling directly above us. The creature's limb was covered in thick, dark fur and ended in a hand with fingers like tree branches. It swept back and forth, searching for us in the darkness below. The smell became overwhelming, wild, animal musk mixed with something ancient and threatening. "Stay back," I shouted, raising the shotgun. But the creature wasn't trying to grab us. It was studying us, learning about us. The massive hand moved carefully, almost gently, as if it understood we were fragile compared to its strength. More ceiling tiles fell as the creature enlarged the hole. A huge head appeared in the opening, human-like but covered in hair, with intelligent eyes that reflected our flashlight beams. It wasn't attacking. It was examining us with obvious curiosity. "Nobody move," Tom whispered. "Don't threaten it." The creature's face was frightening but not necessarily hostile. It watched each of us individually, as if counting and cataloging the humans in its territory. When its gaze met mine, I felt like it was evaluating me specifically, perhaps recognizing that I was the leader of our group. For several long moments, we stared at each other, across species. The creature seemed to be making some kind of decision about us. Then it withdrew. The head disappeared back through the roof, and we heard heavy footsteps moving away from the building. The immediate threat was gone, but we all knew the creatures were still out there, still watching. "What just happened?" Sarah asked. "I think," Tom said slowly, "we just met the locals, and they wanted to know who was visiting their neighborhood." The rest of the night passed without further incidents. The creatures remained nearby. We could hear occasional sounds and catch glimpses of movement, but they didn't attempt to enter the building again. It was as if the direct encounter had satisfied their curiosity about us. When dawn finally came, the sounds faded into the forest. Around 9 o'clock, we heard the rumble of heavy machinery approaching. The state highway department had sent snowplows to clear the road. Within an hour, the immediate area around the station was accessible again. The rescue crew was surprised to find 8 stranded travelers at the remote station, but they efficiently organized transportation back to Anchorage for anyone who needed it. The family's SUV was loaded onto a truck for repair, and the elderly couple accepted a ride to the city. Before leaving, Tom pulled me aside. "You going to report this?" "Report what?" I asked. "Storm damage to a gas pump and generator?" He nodded. "Probably smart. Nobody would believe the real story anyway." After everyone left, I surveyed the damage alone. The destroyed equipment could be explained as storm damage for insurance purposes. The hole in the roof looked like it could have been caused by falling tree branches. Only the huge footprints remained as evidence of what really happened, and the next snowfall would cover those. I filed insurance claims for storm damage and received full coverage for repairs. The station was back to normal operation within a week. Officially, nothing unusual had happened during the blizzard, but things changed for me after that night. I installed better lighting around the station perimeter and keep a high-powered rifle within easy reach. Not because I'm afraid of the creatures. Our encounter convinced me they're intelligent and not necessarily hostile, but because I respect them now. Sometimes, late at night, I catch glimpses of movement in the tree line beyond the station lights. The creatures are still out there, still watching. But we have an understanding now. They know I'm not a threat to their territory, and I know they're protecting their home. I still work alone at the remote station, still serve truckers and travelers on the long highway between cities. But now I know I'm not really alone out here. The wilderness has its own residents, ancient and intelligent beings who were here long before humans built roads through their territory. And as long as I respect their home, they respect mine. The park's highway remains one of Alaska's most remote and dangerous roads. Travelers still get stranded during storms, still need fuel and shelter during emergencies. I'm still here to provide those services, 24 hours a day, 40 miles from the nearest help. But I'm not the only one watching over this stretch of highway anymore. Sometimes the best protection comes from the most unexpected places, even if that protection comes from creatures that aren't supposed to exist. My name is Maria Santos, and I've learned that some job benefits aren't listed in any employee handbook. My name is Marcus Williams, and I've been stocking shelves at the Walmart Supercenter on the outskirts of Anchorage for 4 years now. 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 5 nights a week. It's not the job I dreamed about in high school, but dreams don't pay for my mom's medical bills or keep the lights on in our little apartment. I dropped out senior year when she had her stroke. Someone had to work, and night shift paid better than anything else I could get without a diploma. The store sits about 20 miles outside the city, serving all the small towns and rural communities within 50 miles. During the day, it's busy with families and workers grabbing supplies. But at night, that's my world. Just me, a few other stalkers, and the occasional customer who needs diapers at 3 a.m. or forgot something for tomorrow's lunch. I know every inch of that place. Aisle 12 has the wobbly shelf that needs to be handled carefully. The freezer section's third door doesn't seal right and makes this constant humming noise. The employee break room coffee maker only works if you hit it just right. After 4 years of walking those same aisles, restocking the same products, helping the same late-night customers, it becomes part of you. December 22nd, 2022 started like any other shift. I clocked in at 11, grabbed my handheld scanner, and checked the overnight task list. Heavy restock on groceries, some seasonal clearance to organize, and the usual maintenance stuff. The weather report had been talking about a big storm coming in, but Alaska in December always has big storms coming in. Nothing new there. What was new was how many customers we had that night. Usually, after midnight, the place is practically empty. Maybe 3 or 4 people wandering around, mostly shift workers grabbing energy drinks or snacks. But tonight, we had 8 people scattered throughout the store when the lights went out. It happened at exactly 2 a.m. I was in aisle 7, restocking cereal boxes, when everything went dark. Not gradual, not flickering, just gone. Emergency lighting kicked in a few seconds later, those dim, battery-powered units that make everything look like a haunted house. My handheld scanner died immediately, and when I tried my phone, no signal. The backup generators hummed to life, giving us maybe 30% of normal lighting, enough to see, but everything looked different in that pale, yellowish glow. I could hear other employees calling out, making sure everyone was okay. Standard procedure during power outages is to account for all staff and customers, make sure nobody's hurt, and wait it out. But when I tried to call the overnight manager on my radio, nothing. Just static. The store phones were dead too. And outside? Pure white. The blizzard had hit hard while we were working, turning the parking lot into an invisible wall of snow. Those 8 customers didn't seem too worried. Emergency lighting was working, the store was warm, and we had everything they could need until the storm passed. I've been through plenty of power outages before. Usually, they last an hour or 2, then everything goes back to normal. This time felt different from the start. I was walking from grocery to electronics to check on customers when I noticed the walk was taking longer than usual. Not much longer, maybe an extra minute, but I've made that trip thousands of times. I know exactly how many steps it takes, how long it should feel. Tonight, the electronics section seemed farther away. When I got there, I found 2 customers, an elderly woman looking at phone chargers and a middle-aged man in the gaming section, but something was off about their clothes. The woman wore this old-fashioned dress, like something from the 70s. The man had on a Letterman jacket that looked decades out of date. In the dim lighting, I couldn't be sure, but it felt wrong. "Excuse me," I said to the woman. "Are you finding everything okay? We're having some power issues, but I can help you find what you need." She looked at me with this confused expression. "Power issues? But everything seems fine. Although, I can't find any of those new cordless phones. Do you carry those here?" Cordless phones. In 2022. In the electronics section of a Walmart that hadn't sold home phones in years. I helped her find a phone charger that would work, but the whole interaction felt strange, like we were talking past each other somehow. When I asked how she'd gotten to the store in the blizzard, she just smiled and said she'd been shopping here for years, since the place opened. Walking back toward grocery, I passed the clothing section and stopped. There were more people there now. A family with 2 kids, all dressed like they were from the 90s. The parents were looking at clothes, but the styles on the racks matched what they were wearing, old Walmart fashion from decades ago. I hadn't seen them come in. With only 8 customers in the store, I should have noticed new arrivals. My radio crackled. "Marcus, you there?" It was Jeff, one of the other night stalkers. "Yeah, I'm here." "You seeing more customers than we had earlier?" "That's what I was calling about. I count at least 12 people now, maybe more." "And Marcus?" "Some of these folks are shopping like nothing's wrong. Lady in Cosmetics is buying makeup with cash from the 70s. That's when I started paying closer attention to the products on the shelves. In the dim emergency lighting, everything looked normal at first glance. But when I really looked, some items seemed different. Brand names I didn't recognize, packages with designs that looked outdated, prices that were way too low for 2022. Aisle 9, where I'd been working earlier, now seemed to stretch farther than before. I could see grocery shelves extending back into shadows that shouldn't exist. Our store isn't that big. I could walk from one end to the other in a couple minutes. But now, walking down aisle 9, it felt like it went on forever. I tried to reach the end, just to prove to myself that I was being paranoid. But after walking for what felt like 10 minutes straight, I was still surrounded by grocery shelves, still in aisle 9. I turned around to head back, and behind me, the aisle stretched just as far in the other direction. My radio crackled again. This time, it was a voice I didn't recognize. "Night stock team, please report to customer service." Night stock team to customer service. But when I got to customer service, a walk that took much longer than it should have, there was nobody there. Just the counter, the registers, and that familiar Walmart smell of floor cleaner and recycled air. The announcement hadn't come from our PA system. All our equipment was dead. That's when I noticed the second customer service desk. 20 feet to the left of the normal desk, there was another one. Identical layout, identical design, but the computer monitors were different. Older, with those thick CRT screens we hadn't used in years. A woman in a Walmart vest was standing behind it, helping a customer. Her vest had the old logo, the one from the 80s. I walked over, and she looked up with a friendly smile. "Can I help you find something?" "I'm Marcus. I work here. Night stock." "Oh, wonderful. I'm Patricia. I've been working customer service here since 1987. Are you new?" 1987. She said it like it was yesterday, like it was still true. "Patricia, what year do you think it is?" She laughed. "What a strange question. It's 1987, of course. We just had that big remodel last month. Don't you love how spacious everything feels now?" I looked around. From where I stood, I could see multiple versions of the same sections. 2 electronics departments, one with modern displays and one with older equipment. 3 separate grocery sections, each with different packaging and price styles. The store had become layered with different time periods, all existing at once. My radio came to life again, multiple voices this time, all calling for help with customers, different stockers from different years, all trying to do their jobs in the same impossible space. "Marcus, can you help in electronics? Customer wants to buy a VCR." "Stock team to toys, need help finding Atari games." "Anyone know where the cassette tapes moved to?" I tried to respond, but my voice just added to the chaos. Every Walmart employee from every year the store had been open, all working the same night shift at the same time. The customers were multiplying too. Everywhere I looked, people from different decades were shopping side by side. A woman from the 50s trying to pay with a check. Teenagers from the 90s looking for grunge music CDs. Families from the 2000s with small children asking for toys that wouldn't be invented for years. And they all needed help. They all looked at me with expectation, like I was supposed to know where everything was across 40 years of retail history. I tried to leave, found the main entrance and pushed through the doors, but instead of the snowy parking lot, I was back in the store. Different section, same impossible building. I tried the emergency exits, the employee entrance, even the loading dock doors. Every exit led back inside to another part of the endless Walmart. The PA system crackled to life, clear as day, despite the power outage. "Attention shoppers, it's time for our midnight special. All departments are open and fully staffed. Our dedicated employees are here to serve you across all eras of retail excellence." Nobody was in the management office. Nobody was operating the PA system. But the voice continued, announcing sales on products from every decade, calling for price checks on items that hadn't existed for years. The cash registers started working by themselves. Customers lined up, scanning their items, paying with money from their respective time periods, and the machines accepted everything. Coins from the 60s, bills from the 80s, credit cards from the 2000s, all processed automatically. That's when I saw him. The store manager, standing by the customer service desk. But not our current manager. This guy wore an old-style Walmart shirt and had that 80s hair that was way too big for his head. "Marcus Williams," he called out. Just the man I wanted to see. I walked over, feeling like I didn't have a choice. "Sir, you've been doing excellent work here, son. 4 years of dedicated service, always reliable, never missed a shift. That's the kind of commitment Walmart values." "Thank you, sir. But I think there might be some confusion. No confusion at all. We've been watching you, Marcus. Watching how you care for our customers, how you know every inch of this store, how you never give up on helping people find what they need. He gestured around at the impossible maze of retail space. We'd like to offer you a promotion. A promotion? Permanent overnight manager. All shifts, all time periods. You'd be responsible for ensuring excellent customer service across every era of our store's history. Think about it. You'd never have to worry about job security again. You'd be an essential part of the Walmart family forever. I looked around at the endless aisles, the confused customers, the employees from different decades, all trying to do their jobs in the same crowded space. What if I say no? His smile didn't change, but his eyes went cold. Well, Marcus, our customers depend on you. Look at them. They need your help finding products, understanding prices, navigating between time periods. You wouldn't abandon them, would you? That wouldn't be very professional. He was right. Everywhere I looked, customers were struggling. The woman from the 70s couldn't understand why phone chargers cost so much. The family from the 90s couldn't find the toys their kids wanted because they wouldn't exist for another decade. Elderly shoppers from the 80s were confused by self-checkout machines that didn't exist in their time. They all needed help. And after 4 years of night stock, helping customers was just instinct. But something in the manager's smile told me that once I said yes, I'd never leave. I'd become part of the store's collection, another employee working forever to serve customers across time. The PA system announced another special. Attention shoppers, Black Friday prices now available throughout the store. All customers from all time periods welcome. Suddenly, the store filled with aggressive shoppers from every decade. People pushing, grabbing, fighting over products. The peaceful, confused browsing turned into retail warfare as customers from different eras competed for limited items across time. I watched a woman from the 60s argue with a teenager from the 2000s over a television that was cutting edge in one era and obsolete in another. A father from the 80s fought with a couple from the 90s over toys his children wouldn't recognize. The chaos was getting dangerous. People were getting hurt, confused, scared. The supernatural crowd control of mixing decades of shopping behavior into one space was creating violence. I made my choice. Using everything I'd learned in 4 years of night stock, I started guiding people to safety. I knew every corner, every aisle, every storage room in the store. Even across time periods, the basic layout was similar. I could get people away from the crowds, help them find what they actually needed, explain why certain products worked differently in different eras. I worked through the night, protecting customers, helping them understand each other across decades, using my retail knowledge to prevent the supernatural Black Friday from turning deadly. And at 7 a.m., when the day shift was supposed to start, morning light broke through the windows for the first time since the power went out. The endless aisles snapped back to normal size. The customers from other decades faded away like they were never there. The backup generators shut down and regular power returned. I was standing by the entrance, exhausted, still holding my scanner from 12 hours earlier. The 8 original customers were heading for their cars as the parking lot plows cleared the last of the snow. Everything was normal, except I remembered all of it. Every customer I'd helped, every impossible product I'd explained, every decade of retail history that had played out in one supernatural night. I turned in my scanner, clocked out, and quit. 2 months later, I opened a small general store in a rural community outside Anchorage. Nothing fancy, just basic supplies for folks who don't want to drive to the big stores. But I've got an instinct for knowing exactly what people need, even before they ask. Customers say I'm the most helpful shopkeeper they've ever met, like I understand what they're really looking for. I guess 4 years of night stock taught me more than just how to restock shelves. Sometimes, serving people across time gives you perspective on what customer service really means. But I never shop at Walmart anymore. And I always make sure my store closes before midnight. My name is Jessica Chen, and I've been working in hotels for 8 years. I started as a front desk clerk right out of college, worked my way up through housekeeping supervisor, and finally became a night manager. I love helping people, even when they're tired, stressed, or dealing with emergencies. There's something special about being the person who makes sure everyone sleeps safely. I thought I'd seen everything. Drunk guests, medical emergencies, power outages during storms, even a small kitchen fire once. But what happened last December at the Denali Highway Lodge changed everything I thought I knew about protecting my guests. Some threats don't come from inside the building, some come from the sky. The Denali Highway Lodge sits about 40 miles south of the national park entrance. It's a simple 2-story building with 60 rooms, nothing fancy, but clean and comfortable. We get park visitors in summer, truckers year-round, and emergency travelers when the highway gets bad. December is our slowest month. Most nights, I'd have maybe 12 rooms occupied, sometimes less. Working the night shift means I'm alone from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. I handle check-ins for late arrivals, deal with any guest problems, and do the security rounds. Every hour, I walk the hallways and check the parking lot. The owners trust me completely, and I've never had a serious incident on my watch. That week in December, we had 10 guests. A trucker named Mike was staying for his mandatory rest period. An elderly Alaskan native couple, the Johnsons, were driving to Anchorage for a medical appointment. 3 construction workers were here for a pipeline repair job. A young couple was heading to Fairbanks, and 2 business travelers were going to meetings in different towns. Everything seemed normal until the reports started coming in. It began Tuesday night. Mike came to the front desk around 2 a.m., looking shaken up. He's a big guy, been driving for 20 years, not easily spooked. "Jessica, you might think I'm crazy, but I saw something out there," he said, pointing toward the highway, flying alongside my truck for about 10 miles. "What kind of bird?" I asked, figuring it was an owl or something. "No bird I've ever seen. This thing was huge. Had to be 7 feet tall, with wings that spread out like 15 feet, looked almost like a person, but with massive black wings." I wrote it down in the incident log, mostly to make him feel better. Truckers get tired, see things sometimes. It happens. But then Mrs. Johnson came down Wednesday morning with the same story. She and her husband had seen it around midnight, following their car for several miles. "It had red eyes," she said quietly, "bright red, like warning lights. My husband says it's a Thunderbird spirit. Says they show up when something bad is coming." By Thursday, all 3 construction workers had seen it too. Same description every time. 7 feet tall, black wings, red eyes, flying along the highway like it was following the road. I started checking our security cameras more carefully. We have 4 cameras outside, 1 on each corner of the building, covering the parking lot and the area around the hotel. Thursday night at 3:47 a.m., I caught something on the rear camera. A dark shape, way too big to be any normal bird, flying across the frame. I replayed it in slow motion. The thing had to be massive, and it was definitely flying with purpose, not just drifting on the wind. The timestamp showed it was there for almost 30 seconds, circling the building. Friday night, things got weird. I was doing my 1 a.m. security round when I decided to check the roof access door. We keep it locked, but sometimes maintenance workers forget to secure it properly. As I walked around the building with my flashlight, I looked up at the roof line. It was sitting there. The creature was perched on the edge of our roof, directly above the main entrance. In the glow of our parking lot lights, I could see it clearly. It did look like a person, but wrong. The torso was muscular and humanoid, but covered in dark feathers or fur. The wings were folded against its back, but even folded, they were enormous. Its feet were like a bird's, with long, sharp talons that gripped the roof edge. When it saw me looking up, it turned its head toward me. The red eyes weren't glowing like lights. They were reflecting the parking lot lights, like an animal's eyes, but brighter. Much brighter. We stared at each other for maybe 15 seconds. Then it spread its wings. They had to span 20 feet, and took off, flying north toward the park. I ran back inside and immediately called my manager, Carol. Got her voicemail. Called the state police non-emergency line. The dispatcher was polite but told me they couldn't do anything about wildlife unless it was directly threatening guests. Saturday morning, I found the claw marks. They were all around the roof edge where the thing had been perched. 4-inch gouges in the metal flashing, spaced like huge bird talons. But there were also marks on the window frames of several guest rooms on the 2nd floor. Deep scratches in the aluminum, like something had been trying to look inside. The Johnson couple decided to leave early. Mrs. Johnson told me her husband was getting more worried about the Thunderbird spirit, and they felt safer traveling during daylight. The construction crew also checked out a day early, saying they'd rather drive to the next town. That left us with just 5 guests, Saturday night. Mike, the trucker, the young couple, Sarah and David, and the 2 business travelers. Around 11:30 p.m., just after I'd started my shift, I heard tapping on the windows. At first, I thought it was sleet or hail starting up, but the weather was clear. The tapping was coming from the second floor, room 237. That was Sarah and David's room. Tap, 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 pause. Tap, 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 pause. Tap, tap, tap. It was rhythmic, like someone was doing it on purpose. I called their room from the front desk. "Are you hearing tapping on your window?" I asked Sarah. "Yes, and it's freaking us out. We looked outside, but we can't see anything. The sound is coming from right above us, like something's on the roof." I grabbed my flashlight and went outside. The tapping continued as I walked around the building, but I couldn't see anything on the roof or near their window. Then I realized something that made my blood run cold: the tapping pattern. It was Morse code. I learned Morse code in Girl Scouts years ago. As I listened, I started recognizing the letters. SARAH, pause, DAVID. It was spelling out their names. I ran back inside and called their room again. "Pack your things and come down to the lobby." "Now, what's wrong?" "Just come down, bring your keys, we're moving you to a different room." While they packed, I checked our guest registry on the computer. Sarah and David Martinez, driving from Seattle to Anchorage, paid with a credit card. Standard check-in information. How could something know their names? I moved them to room 118, on the first floor, facing the front parking lot. As we walked down the hallway with their luggage, the tapping started again. But now it was coming from multiple windows on the second floor, moving along the building like something was walking across the roof, tapping on each window as it passed. At 1 a.m., Mike came to the front desk. "Jessica, that thing is back. It's been sitting on my truck for the last hour." I looked out at the parking lot. Mike's semi was parked near the far edge, and there was definitely something large and dark on top of the cab. "Has it done anything besides sit there? It keeps looking at the hotel, like it's watching for something. And Jessica, I swear it knows I'm in room 204. Earlier, it tapped on my window in this pattern." He demonstrated the rhythm. "That's my CB call sign in Morse code, WX7749. How the hell would it know that?" I called the state police again. This time, I got transferred to a wildlife officer who promised to drive by in the morning. But morning was 6 hours away. At 2:30 a.m., the power went out. Our backup generator kicked in after about 30 seconds, but it only powers the emergency lighting and the front desk computer. The hallways went dark, except for the exit signs. That's when I heard the air conditioning system making weird noises. Creaking and scraping sounds, like something was moving around inside the ductwork. I have master keys to every room, so I decided to check on all the guests. I started with the business travelers on the first floor. Both rooms were fine, guests sleeping soundly. Sarah and David were awake in 118, sitting on their bed with the lights on, listening to the sounds coming from the air vent above their heads. "It's in the walls," David whispered. "Moving around up there." I could hear it too. Scratching, scraping, like something large was crawling through the ducts. "Get dressed," I told them. "We're going to the lobby, all of us." I woke up the 2 business travelers and Mike and brought everyone down to the lobby. 5 guests and me, sitting in the emergency lighting, listening to something move around inside our building. At 3:15 a.m., it started talking. The voice came through the air vents, echoing from somewhere inside the ductwork, deep and raspy, but definitely forming words. "Dangerous. Bridge. Morning. Death." We all heard it clearly. "What is it saying?" Sarah asked. The voice came again, clearer this time. "Bridge breaks. Dawn. Many die. Flee south." Mike stood up. "That's the highway bridge, about 20 miles north, the one over Denali Creek." "Why would the bridge break?" I asked. The voice answered, like it could hear us. "Snow. Ice. Avalanche. Bridge falls. Cars fall. Death." Mrs. Johnson had mentioned avalanche warnings in the area, but the highway department hadn't closed anything. "You're saying there's going to be an avalanche that destroys the bridge?" I called out to the vents. "Dawn. 1 hour. Flee now. Survive." I looked at the clock. 4:20 a.m. Dawn was around 6 a.m. in December. One of the business travelers, a guy named Paul, shook his head. "This is insane. We're taking advice from some kind of bird monster?" The voice came back, sounding almost sad. "Not monster. Guardian. Protect humans. Warn of danger. Like ancestors." Mike was already moving toward the stairs. "I'm getting my stuff and leaving. I've driven that bridge 100 times. If there's even a chance it's going to go down, I'm not taking it." The thing was right about one detail. There had been heavy snow in the mountains all week, and the Weather Service had issued avalanche warnings for the higher elevations. I had to make a decision. As the night manager, I was responsible for everyone's safety. I could either ignore the creature's warning and hope it was wrong, or evacuate everyone and risk looking like an idiot if nothing happened. I chose to trust it. "Everyone pack your things. We're leaving in 20 minutes. "You're serious?" Paul asked. "Dead serious. If there's even a small chance that bridge is going to collapse, I'm not having anyone's death on my conscience." As we packed, the creature kept talking through the vents, giving us more details. "Ice dam broke upstream, water and ice flowing. Bridge supports weak, 20 minutes to collapse." I called the highway department and the state police to report a possible bridge emergency, but they said they couldn't close a major highway based on a wildlife warning. We loaded into 3 cars. Mike took his semi and headed south. The rest of us followed in our vehicles. I locked up the hotel and left a note for the day shift, explaining where everyone had gone. As we drove south, away from the bridge, the sun was just starting to come up behind the mountains. At exactly 6:27 a.m., we heard it. A sound like thunder, but longer. Rolling and crashing, echoing off the mountains. We pulled over and got out of our cars. About 20 miles behind us, we could see a massive cloud of snow and debris rising into the air where the highway used to be. Mike's voice crackled over the CB radio. "Bridge is gone, completely gone. Jesus Christ, that thing saved our lives." We found out later that an ice dam had burst upstream, exactly like the creature warned. The flood of water and ice had undercut the bridge supports, and the whole span collapsed into Denali Creek. If we'd been driving north to leave the area, like most guests do after checkout, we would have been on that bridge when it fell. The highway department found our cars would have been crossing the bridge at exactly the time it collapsed. When the rescue teams arrived, they found the hotel lobby door standing wide open. On the front desk, someone had left a note written in what looked like charcoal or burned wood. It said, "Humans safe. Guardian duty complete." I never saw the creature again, but sometimes late at night, I'll hear tapping on the windows of whatever hotel I'm working at. Always in Morse code, usually spelling out weather warnings or telling me to check on a particular guest who might need help. The story made national news. Alaska hotel manager saves lives following cryptid warning. I got promoted to regional safety coordinator for the whole hotel chain, specializing in natural disaster preparedness. But I know the truth. That creature, whatever it was, wasn't a monster. It was exactly what it said, a guardian, something that watches over travelers and tries to keep them safe from dangers they can't see coming. Mrs. Johnson was right about the Thunderbird spirits. And now I listen when they have something to say. Because sometimes the things that look most frightening are actually trying to help us, and sometimes the scariest thing you can do is trust them. My name is Sarah Martinez, and I've been a postal worker for 8 years. Started in downtown Anchorage, delivering mail to apartment buildings and office complexes. Good work, steady pay. But after 6 years of the same city blocks, I wanted something different, something with better pay and adventure. So when a rural route opened up in the mountains, I jumped at it. Better money, beautiful scenery, and I'd be helping folks who really depended on their mail service. I've always taken the postal motto seriously. Neither snow nor rain nor heat nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds. Sounds old-fashioned, but it means something when you're the only link between isolated families and the outside world. In 8 years, I've never missed a delivery. Not once. But what happened in March 2023, during my 3rd winter on Route 47, changed everything I thought I knew about delivering mail. Some deliveries, I learned, don't stop just because the recipient is dead. My route covers 120 miles through the Chugach Mountains, serving 47 addresses scattered across remote valleys. Homesteads, hunting cabins, research stations, and a few old-timers who've lived up there for decades. Some places you can only reach by snowmobile in winter. Others require hiking the last mile because the road's too narrow for my truck. I drive a modified Ford postal truck with snow tires, chains, and a full emergency kit. Extra food, water purification tablets, sleeping bag rated to -30, flares, satellite phone, and a CB radio. The post office requires all that gear for mountain routes. Smart policy, because cell service is spotty at best, and the weather can turn deadly fast. March 15th started normal. Clear skies, roads in good condition, and I had 26 deliveries to make. Mix of regular mail, a few packages, and some government checks that folks were counting on. I was making good time until I hit Copper Creek Pass around noon. The avalanche came out of nowhere. One second I'm driving through a narrow canyon, next second there's a wall of snow and rocks sliding down the mountainside. Blocked the road completely, had to be 30 feet high and 100 feet wide. My truck was fine, parked just outside the slide zone, but I wasn't going anywhere. Tried the CB radio first. Nothing but static. The avalanche had probably taken out the repeater tower. Satellite phone was dead. Battery must have drained overnight. Should have checked it that morning, but you get careless when everything's routine. I had enough supplies for 3 days, maybe 4 if I was careful. Problem was, I still had 23 addresses left to deliver, including medicine for Mrs. Patterson and Social Security checks for 3 families. Federal law is clear. Mail must be delivered unless it's literally impossible. And I wasn't ready to call it impossible yet. That's when I noticed something strange in my mailbag. There was an envelope addressed to Henry Morrison on Birch Creek Road. I knew that name, knew the address. But Henry Morrison had died 6 months ago. I'd delivered sympathy cards to his place after the funeral. His cabin was empty now, had been all winter. Figured it was a clerical error. Sometimes it takes months for death notifications to update all the systems. I set the letter aside to return to the depot, but when I looked in my bag an hour later, there were 3 more letters for dead people. Agnes Kowalski, on Mountain View Trail, Harris, died 2 years ago. Robert Chen, at mile marker 8, heart attack last spring. Elizabeth Ward at the old mining camp, passed away in 2015. All the postmarks were current, all the addresses were real, but all the people were definitely dead. By evening, I had a whole pile of mail for deceased residents. 12 letters, 3 packages, and a magazine subscription. The weird part wasn't just the names, it was that the mail kept appearing. I'd count the pieces, then check an hour later and find more, like someone was adding them while I wasn't looking. I set up camp in the truck that night, engine running periodically for heat. Couldn't shake the feeling that I was supposed to deliver that dead mail, like it was part of my route, whether it made sense or not. Federal regulations don't have a clause for supernatural circumstances. The next morning, I decided to attempt delivery on foot. The snowshoes from my emergency kit would get me to most of the addresses, at least the ones within hiking distance. Started with the closest one, Henry Morrison's place. The cabin looked abandoned, like I expected. Windows boarded up, snow piled against the door, no tire tracks anywhere. But when I knocked, someone answered. "Mail delivery," I called out, which felt ridiculous. The door opened, and there was Henry Morrison. Same flannel shirt he always wore, same gray beard, same friendly smile. Exactly like he looked 6 months ago, before the cancer took him. "Sarah, good to see you," he said like nothing was wrong. "Cold day for deliveries." I handed him the letter, trying to keep my hands steady. Henry, how are you doing?" "Oh, getting by. Wife's been worried about the grandkids down in Fairbanks. This letter might have news." I knew his wife had moved to a nursing home after he died, knew the grandkids had grown up and moved to California. But Henry opened the letter like he was expecting it, read it with a smile, then handed me 3 envelopes. "Could you deliver these for me? Important messages for some folks on your route." The letters were addressed to living people. The Pattersons at Willow Creek, the Johnson family at the ranger station, the new couple who'd bought the Henderson place. All current residents, all very much alive. "I'll make sure they get delivered," I said, "because what else do you say to a dead man handing you mail?" Henry nodded and closed the door. I stood there in the snow for 5 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. Then I noticed smoke coming from the chimney, which was impossible because there was no wood pile, no tracks, no signs anyone had been living there. But I had a job to do. The next stop was Agnes Kowalski's place, 2 miles through the woods. Same scenario, abandoned cabin, but Agnes answered the door. She'd been dead for 2 years, but there she was, gray hair in the same bun, wearing her blue house address. "Agnes, I have a package for you." "Wonderful, I've been expecting that." She took the package, then handed me 2 more letters. "Could you make sure these reach their destinations?" Very important. This kept happening all day. Every dead person had mail waiting, and every one of them gave me letters to deliver to the living. Letters that looked official, urgent, like they contained information people needed to know. By afternoon, I understood what was happening. I wasn't just a mail carrier anymore. I was a messenger between the living and the dead, carrying final words that never got spoken, apologies that never got made, and warnings about things only the dead could see. The worst part? It felt right, like this was always supposed to be part of my job. That evening, I made it to the Patterson place with their medicine and one of the letters from Henry Morrison. Mrs. Patterson read it and started crying. "This is impossible," she said. "This is Henry's handwriting, but he died months ago." The letter was an apology. Henry explaining that he'd borrowed some tools 20 years ago and forgotten to return them. They were in his shed, Mrs. Patterson could have them now. Her husband had been looking for those exact tools to fix their generator. "Sarah, I don't understand what's happening, but thank you for bringing this." I delivered 6 more letters from dead people that day. Each one contained information the living needed. Where to find important documents, how to repair broken equipment, warnings about dangerous areas on their property, practical stuff that could only come from people who'd lived in these mountains for decades. The dead weren't haunting anyone, they were just trying to finish their mail. By the 3rd day, I was getting letters from people who'd been dead for years, even decades. Miners from the 1800s, with information about hidden caches of supplies. Settlers who knew which trails stayed safe during avalanche season. Trappers who could predict weather patterns better than any meteorologist. All of them had mail to deliver. All of them were waiting for someone to complete their final postal route. The breaking point came when I found a letter addressed to me, in my own handwriting. Sarah Martinez, Rural Route 47 Postal Carrier. The return address was my own name, but the postmark was dated 3 days in the future. My hands shook as I opened it. "Sarah, if you're reading this, you're about to face a choice. There's going to be another avalanche tomorrow at 3 p.m., bigger than the first one. It'll bury the entire valley where the Johnson family lives. The old-timers have been trying to warn people for weeks, but no one can hear the dead except you. You can save them, but only if you deliver the warning letters tonight. The route is dangerous. The storm is coming. You might not make it back. But that's the job. Neither snow nor rain, right? Sarah Martinez, Future." I read the letter 3 times. In my experience, the dead mail was always accurate, always important. If my future dead self was warning about an avalanche, people were going to die unless I acted. I spent that night hiking through the worst blizzard I'd ever seen, delivering warning letters to every family in the danger zone. 23 letters in total, each one containing specific evacuation instructions and safe route information from people who'd lived through mountain disasters decades ago. The Johnsons thought I was crazy when I showed up at midnight, warning them about an avalanche that hadn't happened yet, but they knew me, trusted my judgment, and agreed to pack up and head to the ranger station just in case. Same thing at every stop. Sarah's never been wrong about mountain safety. If she says evacuate, we evacuate. By dawn, every family in the valley was safely relocated to high ground. The avalanche hit at exactly 3 p.m., just like the letter predicted. Buried 12 cabins, destroyed 2 miles of road, and would have killed 17 people if they'd been home. Instead, everyone was safe, watching from the ranger station as their homes disappeared under tons of snow and rock. That was when I realized I'd completed the supernatural postal route. All the dead mail delivered, all the living people warned, all the final messages passed along. The dead letter writers had found their closure, and I'd found my true purpose as a mail carrier. The rescue teams reached us 2 days later, found the whole community safe, well supplied, and with an incredible story about a postal worker who delivered mail from the dead to save the living. USPS gave me a commendation for exceptional service under extreme conditions. They never asked about the supernatural details, probably figured it was hypothermia-induced hallucinations. I didn't correct them. I still work Route 47, still deliver mail to those remote mountain communities. Most days it's normal postal service, bills, packages, magazines, government checks. But sometimes I find letters from people who died decades ago, usually containing information that living folks need to know. Weather warnings, safety tips, locations of emergency supplies, messages of love and forgiveness that never got delivered. And I deliver every single one. Because that's the job. Neither snow nor rain nor death itself stays this courier from completing her appointed rounds. The dead deserve their mail service too. My name is Kevin Davis, and I've been driving for Uber in Anchorage, Alaska for 3 years now. Before this, I spent 12 years in construction, but after a back injury ended that career, I needed something with more flexibility. Driving gives me that. I set my own hours, work when I want, and honestly, the money's pretty good if you know when and where to drive. I drive a 2018 Honda Accord, silver, with leather seats and a phone charger for every passenger. I keep it spotless because that's what gets you 5 stars. In 3 years, I've maintained a perfect rating, 4.98 stars, with over 2,000 rides. I know every street in Anchorage, every shortcut, every route that saves time. My regular shift is 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. on weekends, when the surge pricing kicks in and I can clear $300 a night in tips alone. I love the late-night rides. You get interesting people, airport runs, bar pickups, folks heading to work early shifts. The conversations are better too. People open up more when it's dark and they're tired. But what happened on November 15th, 2023, during that supernatural fog that hit Anchorage, changed everything I thought I knew about giving people rides. Sometimes your passengers aren't going where you think they are. And sometimes they're not even from when you think they are. That Tuesday night started normal enough. I'd already done 8 rides by 1 a.m., making good money on the airport runs. Ted Stevens Airport always had steady business, and with the late flights coming in, I could count on at least 3 more pickups before dawn. Then the fog rolled in. I've lived in Alaska my whole life, and I've never seen fog like this. It came from nowhere. 1 minute the roads were clear, the next minute I couldn't see 10 feet ahead of my headlights. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in 5 minutes. My phone started buzzing with ride cancellations as other drivers logged off, saying it was too dangerous to drive. But dangerous driving means surge pricing. When other drivers quit, the rates go up, sometimes triple. I've driven through blizzards and ice storms. A little fog wasn't going to stop me from making rent. That's when my GPS started acting weird. The screen kept flickering, showing streets that didn't exist, routing me down roads that led to blank spaces on the map. I switched to using my local knowledge instead. 35 years in this city means I don't really need GPS anyway. I know these streets better than any computer. At 1:15 a.m., my phone pinged with a pickup request from the airport. Terminal B, passenger named Michael Chen. The fare showed a destination 40 miles outside the city, way out past Eagle River. Long ride, probably $80 100 with the surge pricing. I accepted immediately. I found him at the curb outside arrivals, well-dressed businessman in his 50s, expensive suit, leather briefcase. He looked tired, but polite as he got in the back seat. "Thanks for picking me up," he said. "Not many drivers out tonight." "No problem. Where exactly are we heading? The GPS isn't working great in this fog." "Oh, I have directions." He pulled out a piece of paper. "Take the Glen Highway north about 30 miles. Then there's a turnoff marked with a wooden sign. Can't miss it." I started driving, following his directions. The fog was so thick I had to use my hazards and drive maybe 20 miles per hour. But Michael didn't seem worried. He was looking out the window like he could actually see something. "Business trip?" I asked, making conversation. "Yes, just flew in from Seattle. Big meeting tomorrow about the merger." "Well, today, I guess." He checked his watch, an old Rolex that looked vintage. "These late flights always mess up your schedule." "Tell me about it. What kind of business?" "Telecommunications. We're expanding cellular coverage up here. Big opportunities in Alaska, now that more people are getting cell phones. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Cell phones? Everyone already had smartphones. Maybe he meant expanding coverage for remote areas. But the way he said it was weird, like cell phones were still new technology. Payment is cash, right? He asked, pulling out his wallet. Cash works. I saw him counting bills, all 20s, but something looked off about them. When we stopped at a red light, I glanced back. The money looked old, like really old. The bills had a different design than current 20s. These bills okay? I asked. They look vintage. Just got them from the bank yesterday. They should be fine. Yesterday? Those bills looked like they were from the 1,990 seconds. We drove in silence for a while. Michael gave directions at each turn, never hesitating, like he knew exactly where we were going. But his directions were taking us toward an area I recognized, the site of that plane crash from 1,995. Flight 2847 crashed during a snowstorm, killed all 88 people on board. There was a memorial out there now. You know this area well? I asked. I should. I fly this route all the time. Though the weather tonight reminds me of that bad flight we had a few weeks ago. Pilot said we almost had to turn around. A few weeks ago? That crash was 28 years ago. My phone pinged with another ride request, same pickup location, Terminal B. Another passenger needing a ride to the exact same destination Michael had given me. In this fog, at 2 a.m., what were the odds? Mind if I pick up another passenger? I asked. They're going to the same place. Of course not. More the merrier. I turned around and headed back to the airport, following Michael's directions in reverse. He guided me perfectly, like he'd driven these roads 1,000 times. But the roads felt different now. Longer, with turns I didn't remember. The fog was playing tricks with distances. At the airport, a woman in a flight attendant uniform was waiting. She looked to be in her 30s, with perfectly styled hair and makeup despite the late hour. Her uniform was navy blue with gold trim, but the style looked old-fashioned. The airline logo wasn't one I recognized. "Thank you so much," she said, getting into the seat next to Michael. I wasn't sure anyone would be driving in this weather. "No problem," I said. "Long night?" "The longest. Our flight was delayed for hours. Weather problems in Seattle, but we finally made it." She turned to Michael. "You were on 2,847 too, weren't you?" "Yeah, seat 12C. You were working first class, right?" "That's right. I remember you. You ordered the chicken dinner." Flight 2847. The same flight number as the crash. But that was impossible. That plane never made it to Anchorage. "When did you land?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "About an hour ago," she said. "Right on schedule, despite the delays." "What airline?" "Northern Sky Airways," she said proudly. "Best customer service in Alaska." Northern Sky Airways went out of business in 1995, the same year as the crash. I started driving again, following the same route. The woman, her name tag said Jennifer, chatted with Michael about the flight, about the weather, about how glad they were to finally be home. They talked like the flight had just happened, like they'd just walked off that plane an hour ago. But Flight 2847 crashed into the mountains 28 years ago. Everyone on board died. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. This wasn't possible. These people couldn't be passengers from that flight. They couldn't be dead. They were sitting right there, breathing, talking, paying me money. Old money. From 1,995. My phone pinged again. Another pickup from Terminal B. "Same destination." "Another passenger?" Michael asked. "Yeah." My voice cracked a little. "Same place you're going." "Great. Probably someone else from our flight." This time it was an older man in a business suit, carrying a briefcase and looking excited. He got in and immediately started talking to the others like he knew them. "Can you believe we made it?" he said. "After that turbulence over the mountains, I thought for sure we were going down. But Captain Morrison pulled us through." Captain Morrison. I remembered that name from the news reports about the crash. He'd been the pilot of Flight 2847. "Best pilot Northern Sky ever had," Jennifer agreed. They were all talking about the flight like it had just happened, like they'd just lived through what should have been their deaths 28 years ago. And they had no idea. I kept driving, picking up more passengers. Each trip to the airport brought another person from Flight 2847. A young mother with a baby. An elderly couple celebrating their anniversary. a businessman traveling for a conference. All of them with tickets dated the 15th of November 1995. All of them carrying old money. All of them talking about current events like it was still 1995. By 4 a.m., I had 8 passengers in my car, which should have been impossible, but somehow they all fit. They were excited, happy to be home, making plans for the next day. Plans they'd made 28 years ago and never got to complete. The destination they all wanted was getting closer. Through the fog, I could make out the shape of mountains ahead. We were definitely heading toward the crash site. "This is it," Michael said, pointing to a turnoff I could barely see. "Right here." I turned onto a dirt road that led up into the hills. The fog was starting to thin a little, and in the distance I could see lights. As we got closer, I realized it was a memorial site. Stone markers, flowers, photos, and in the center, a large bronze plaque listing the names of everyone who died in the crash. I stopped the car and looked at the plaque. Every single one of my passengers' names was on it. "This is perfect," Jennifer said, getting out. "Just where we wanted to be." They all got out of the car, looking around like they were seeing home after a long trip. The fog was lifting now, and dawn was starting to break. In the growing light, I could see the wreckage still scattered in the distance, pieces of the plane that had never been fully cleared away. "Kevin," Michael said, walking back to my window. "Thank you. This ride meant everything to us." "We've been trying to get home for so long," Jennifer added, "but no other driver would take us." The elderly man handed me a wad of cash. "For your trouble, and for believing in us." I looked down at the money. It was old, from 1995, but as I watched, it shimmered and changed into current bills. Real money, more than I'd ever made in a single night. "What happened to you all?" I asked. "We had some unfinished business," the young mother said, holding her baby. "Things we needed to say goodbye to. People we needed to see one more time. And now? Now we can rest," Michael said, "thanks to you." As the sun came up fully, my passengers started walking toward the memorial. But with each step, they became more transparent, more like mist than people. By the time they reached the bronze plaque, they were completely gone. I sat there for a long time, looking at the money in my hands and the empty memorial site. My phone had no record of the rides I'd given. No trip history, no passenger ratings, no evidence that any of it had happened. Except for the money. And the memory. I drove back to Anchorage as the fog cleared completely. The roads looked normal again, familiar. My GPS started working. But everything felt different now. Over the next few months, I kept driving my usual shifts. Most nights were normal, regular passengers, regular destinations, regular conversations about work and weather and life. But sometimes, especially on foggy nights, my phone would ping with unusual requests. Passengers who needed rides to places that didn't exist anymore. People who paid with old money and talked about the past like it was the present. I always took those rides. Other drivers started avoiding the strange pickups, the ones with old addresses or impossible destinations. But I learned that some passengers have been waiting a long time to get where they need to go. And sometimes, the most important ride you give isn't about taking someone to a place, it's about helping them get to peace. I still have that perfect rating, 5 stars, over 3,000 rides now. Sometimes I get reviews that don't make sense, passengers thanking me for trips I don't remember, destinations I've never been to. But my account always shows the money. And the money is always real. Because in this job, you learn that everyone deserves a ride home. Even if they've been waiting 28 years for someone willing to take them there. The fog still comes to Anchorage sometimes, and when it does, I keep driving. My name is Carlos Morales, and I've been a food delivery driver for Arctic Eats for 6 years now. Most people think delivering food is easy work, but they've never tried driving 100 miles through sub-zero temperatures to bring hot meals to people living completely off the grid. I cover everything within a 100-mile radius of Fairbanks, hunting lodges, research stations, homesteads where people live 20 miles from their nearest neighbor. My modified pickup truck has special heated containers, emergency survival gear, and a CB radio that's saved my life more times than I can count. Arctic Eats promises delivery regardless of weather, and I've never broken that promise. But what happened in January 2024 made me question whether some places are just too dangerous to reach. The call came in on a Tuesday morning when the temperature hit negative 45 degrees. Dr. Sarah Kim, from a climate research station, needed an emergency food delivery. Her station was studying permafrost melting 40 miles northeast of Fairbanks, completely isolated except for radio contact. The approaching blizzard meant this would be my last chance to reach them for at least a week. I loaded my truck with enough supplies to last her team several days. Hot soups, frozen meals, coffee, and emergency rations. The insulated containers would keep everything warm for about 4 hours in this cold. My truck had heavy-duty snow tires, chains, and a GPS system specifically designed for extreme conditions. The CB radio crackled with weather warnings, but I'd driven in worse storms before. The first 30 miles went smoothly. The road was plowed and my truck handled the ice without problems. But as I got closer to the research station coordinates, something felt wrong. My GPS started giving conflicting directions, showing the station in 2 different locations only minutes apart. I figured it was interference from the storm, so I switched to my backup navigation system. When I finally found the research station, my heart sank. The entire facility was tilted at a strange angle, like someone had tried to pick up the buildings and drop them. Large cracks ran through the foundation, and one corner of the main building had sunk about 3 feet into the ground. The permafrost beneath the station had completely collapsed, creating a huge pit that hadn't been there in the satellite photos from last month. Dr. Kim met me outside, and she looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, hands shaking from more than just the cold. She helped me unload the food containers while explaining what had happened. The rapid permafrost melting had exposed a massive underground cavern system that their geological equipment couldn't even measure properly. The readings suggested the space below ground was enormous, possibly hundreds of feet deep and stretching for miles in every direction. "We found something down there, Carlos," she said as we carried the supplies inside. "Something that's been frozen for thousands of years, and it's starting to thaw." She showed me preserved tissue samples from the permafrost. Dark, fibrous material that looked almost like muscle tissue. But according to her analysis, the organic material didn't match any known species. The cellular structure suggested it was from some kind of prehistoric animal, possibly from the last ice age. The strangest part was that dead tissue was showing signs of cellular activity after being frozen for thousands of years. The research station's main building creaked and groaned around us as the foundation continued to shift. Dr. Kim's equipment was spread across multiple tables, all showing readings that seemed impossible. Seismic monitors detected large movements in the underground cavern, something massive shifting around down there. The movement patterns were too regular to be random geological activity. Whatever was moving below us was doing it on purpose. "How big?" I asked, staring at the seismic readings. "Based on the vibration patterns, at least 20 feet long. Maybe bigger." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "And Carlos, the temperature down there is rising fast. Something is generating heat in that cavern." That's when we heard it. A deep rumbling sound that seemed to come from directly beneath the building. Not the random groaning of shifting ice, but something rhythmic, purposeful, like breathing. My CB radio started acting up, picking up strange interference that sounded almost like growling. Dr. Kim's communication equipment had been damaged when the foundation shifted, cutting off contact with the outside world. We were completely alone out here, 40 miles from the nearest neighbor, with something large and unknown moving around beneath our feet. The rumbling got louder. Through the research station windows, I could see new cracks forming in the ground outside. Steam was rising from some of the cracks, which shouldn't be possible in this temperature. The permafrost was melting so fast that I could actually watch it happening. "We need to leave," Dr. Kim said, frantically packing her most important research data. "This discovery is too dangerous. If what I think is down there actually wakes up." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. A section of ground outside collapsed with a loud crash, revealing a glimpse of the cavern below. The space was much larger than we'd thought, and something was definitely moving around down there. I ran to my truck to get it ready for evacuation, but my engine wouldn't start. The extreme cold had finally gotten to it, despite all my winterization efforts. While I was trying to get the engine to turn over, the ground near the truck started to crack. The cracks formed a rough circle about 20 feet across, like something was trying to break through from underneath. Dr. Kim screamed from inside the research station. I rushed back to find her staring at her seismic equipment. The readings showed massive movement directly beneath us, something large enough to register on instruments designed to detect earthquakes. The movement was getting closer to the surface. That's when I saw it. A massive claw, easily 3 feet long, broke through the floor of the research station. Dark fur covered what looked like the leg of some enormous animal. As more of the creature pushed through, I realized we were looking at something that had no business existing in the modern world. The thing was huge, at least 18 feet long, with saber-tooth features and claws designed for killing. Its eyes were intelligent, calculating. This wasn't some mindless beast. It was a predator that had been perfectly preserved in the permafrost, and the rapid thawing had brought it back to life. The prehistoric creature pulled itself completely through the floor, destroying most of Dr. Kim's equipment in the process. It tested the air with its nose, learning our scents. When it looked directly at us, I saw recognition in its eyes. It knew we were prey. We ran. Dr. Kim grabbed her emergency research backup while I led the way to my truck. Behind us, the creature broke through the wall of the research station like it was made of cardboard. Each step it took cracked the frozen ground beneath its massive weight. My truck engine finally started on the 6th try. We jumped in, and I floored the accelerator, but the creature was faster than it had any right to be. This thing had evolved to hunt in Ice Age conditions. Deep snow and extreme cold were its natural environment. It chased us across the frozen landscape, using hunting tactics that were thousands of years old but perfectly suited for catching human-sized prey. "It's hurting us," Dr. Kim shouted over the engine noise. "It's trying to drive us toward something." She was right. The creature wasn't just chasing us randomly. It was forcing us to drive in a specific direction, toward an area where the permafrost had completely collapsed. If we got trapped there, we'd be sitting ducks. I yanked the steering wheel hard left, breaking away from the path the creature wanted us to take. It roared in frustration, a sound like nothing I'd ever heard before. The prehistoric predator changed tactics, charging directly at the truck instead of trying to hurt us. When it hit the side of my truck, the impact nearly rolled us over. The creature's claws scraped against the metal, leaving gouges several inches deep. But I realized something important. The thing was built for Ice Age cold, not modern heat. My truck's engine was running hot from the chase, and when the creature got too close to the exhaust system, it backed away. I had an idea. Instead of running, I started driving in circles around the creature, revving the engine to keep it as hot as possible. The exhaust fumes and engine heat created a barrier the creature couldn't cross. It tried several times to attack, but the heat from my truck's systems drove it back every time. Dr. Kim figured out what I was doing and helped by monitoring the creature's behavior. "It's working," she said. "The heat is making it retreat toward the cavern." We kept up the strategy for almost an hour, using my truck like a weapon against something that had been the ultimate predator thousands of years ago. Modern technology was the creature's weakness. It had no defense against internal combustion engines and industrial heat. Finally, the creature gave up and retreated back into the permafrost cavern. We watched it disappear into the depths, but I knew it wasn't gone permanently. It was just waiting for us to leave, so it could explore this new world at its own pace. We drove straight to Fairbanks and contacted the authorities. Military containment teams arrived at the research site within 12 hours. Dr. Kim's research was classified immediately, and the entire area was quarantined. According to official reports, the research station was abandoned due to geological instability. But Dr. Kim told me the truth before the government took over her research. The permafrost across Alaska and northern Canada is melting at record speed, and her data suggests there could be hundreds of similar creatures preserved in the ice. As the climate continues to change, more of them are going to wake up. I still work for Arctic Eats, but now I carry extra equipment on every delivery. Thermal scanners to detect unusual heat signatures, emergency flares that burn hot enough to drive back cold-adapted predators, and a modified CB radio that can contact military emergency frequencies. Most of my deliveries are still perfectly normal, but twice in the past year, I've detected movement in areas where permafrost has recently melted. The government pays me to report any unusual readings, and they've classified me as a consultant for remote area creature encounters. But they've made it clear that if I ever talk publicly about what I saw that day, my delivery license will disappear and no one will believe my story anyway. Sometimes, when I'm driving the most remote routes, I remember that creature's intelligent eyes. It wasn't just a mindless predator, it was learning about our world, adapting to modern conditions. And every winter, as more permafrost melts and more ancient caverns are exposed, I wonder how many more of them are waking up. The climate scientists say the permafrost melting is irreversible, which means somewhere out there in the Alaskan wilderness, prehistoric predators that have been sleeping for thousands of years are opening their eyes in a world full of easy prey that has no idea how to defend itself against something that evolution forgot. I still make my deliveries, though. Arctic Eats promises service regardless of conditions, and I've never broken that promise. But now I understand that some threats are much older and more dangerous than any blizzard. My name is Tyler Brooks, and I've been working night shifts at retail stores for about 4 years now. Started when I was 18 at a gas station, moved to a 24-hour pharmacy, and for the last 2 years I've been the overnight clerk at the Safeway here in Fairbanks. It's not glamorous work, but it pays decent with the night differential. And I can take my community college classes during the day. I've handled drunk customers, shoplifters, even a guy who tried to rob us with a broken beer bottle. But what happened during the ice storm last January changed everything I thought I knew about working alone at night. I was 22 then, pulling the 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift 5 nights a week. The Safeway on Airport Way is one of the biggest grocery stores in Fairbanks, and even at night we'd get a steady stream of customers, shift workers grabbing dinner at midnight, people picking up baby formula, folks who just needed something and couldn't wait until morning. The store stays pretty busy until about 2 a.m., then it's mostly just me, restocking shelves, mopping floors, and watching the security monitors in the office. My routine was simple. Check in with the evening manager before they left, do a walkthrough of the store, then start on the overnight tasks. We had about 40 aisles to restock, plus the produce section and the deli area to clean. The freezer and refrigerated sections needed constant monitoring. If the temperatures went off even a degree, I had to call the emergency maintenance line. Corporate was really strict about food safety protocols. January 15th started like any other night. Temperature was sitting at -28, pretty normal for mid-January in Alaska. The Weather Service had been talking about an ice storm coming in from the west, but we get those warnings all winter long. I clocked in at 10, grabbed my radio and the keys to the manager's office, and started my shift. By 1 a.m., I had maybe 6 customers in the store. The ice storm had hit harder than expected, the roads were getting nasty, and I could hear the wind picking up outside. Then, at exactly 1:34 a.m., everything went black. The main power grid had failed. Emergency lighting kicked in about 30 seconds later, but it was just battery-powered LED strips that gave off this weird blue glow. Half the store was in shadows. The registers were dead, the automatic doors wouldn't work, and worse, none of the customers could get to their cars. The parking lot was a sheet of ice, and 3 of them said their car doors were frozen shut. I tried calling my manager, but the phones were dead. Cell service was out too. The radio just gave me static. We were completely cut off. The store had a backup generator, but it only powered the refrigeration units and some basic lighting. The temperature inside started dropping fast. I could see my breath after about an hour. Following corporate emergency protocol, I told the customers they could stay inside where it was warmer, and we'd figure things out when the power came back. That's when Mrs. Chen, this elderly lady who comes in every Tuesday for her prescriptions, grabbed my arm near the produce section. "Tyler, there's something wrong back by the vegetables," she whispered. "I saw an animal, but it wasn't right." I followed her back there with my flashlight. Sure enough, there were puddles of water all over the floor near the lettuce and carrots. Big puddles, like someone had dumped buckets of water everywhere. But here's the weird part. The water smelled like river water. Muddy and organic, not like anything that should be in a grocery store. I checked the ceiling for leaks, looked for burst pipes, but couldn't find any source. The water was just there, and it was spreading. Mrs. Chen kept talking. It was about the size of a dog, but it moved all wrong. Like it was flowing instead of walking. And the shape was wrong too. Too long? With hands instead of paws. I told her it was probably just the emergency lighting playing tricks on her eyes. Stress can make people see things that aren't there. But I made a note to check the plumbing when the power came back. About an hour later, Marcus, a guy who worked the late shift at the airport, came running up to me from the frozen food section. "Dude, there's something in the freezer aisle. I swear to God, it looked like an otter, but it had human hands, and it was huge, like 4 feet long." I went to check it out. The freezer doors had these long scratch marks on them, gouged deep into the metal, way too big and deep for any normal animal. And there was more of that river water, making a trail down the aisle. I followed the water trail through the store. It led past the pharmacy, through the bread aisle, and ended at the employee break room in the back. When I opened the door, about 2 inches of that muddy river water came pouring out. The whole room was flooded. All the employee lockers were torn open from the inside, like something had burst out of them. That's when I started to get really scared. The customers were clustering together near the front of the store now. Nobody wanted to go down the aisles alone. Every few minutes, someone would see movement in their peripheral vision, or hear splashing sounds from empty sections of the store. Then around 4 a.m., Mr. Peterson, this old guy who comes in for his coffee every night, started screaming by the dairy section. "That thing talked to me." He was sobbing. It sounded exactly like my wife. She's been dead for 3 years, but it knew her voice perfectly. It knew things only she would know. He was shaking, pointing down the milk aisle. It told me she was waiting for me in the storage room, used her pet name for me. God help me, I almost followed it. I was trying to calm him down when I heard it myself. A voice from the canned goods aisle, calling my name. It sounded exactly like my mom. "Tyler, honey, I'm lost. Can you help me find the exit?" But my mom lives in Seattle. She's never even been to Alaska. I grabbed my flashlight and went to investigate. That's when I saw it. It was crouched between the soup and pasta aisles. About 4 feet long, covered in slick black fur, with the body of an otter but a human torso and arms. Its face was like a seal's, but the eyes were completely human, intelligent, calculating. It looked right at me and smiled. With human teeth. "Tyler," it said in my mom's voice, "why won't you come help me?" I backed away slowly, trying not to make any sudden movements. When I looked back a few seconds later, it was gone. But there was another puddle of river water where it had been. I got the remaining customers together. There were only 4 of us left. I didn't know when the other 2 had disappeared. "We're staying together from now on," I told them. "Nobody goes anywhere alone." But it was too late. The thing was getting smarter, more aggressive. It started impersonating all of us. I'd see what looked like Mrs. Chen calling for help from the pharmacy, then turn around and see the real Mrs. Chen standing right next to me. The water was everywhere now. It was coming up through the floor drains, pouring out of the ceiling vents, even seeping out of the walls. The store was turning into some kind of swamp. Around 5 a.m., there were 3 different versions of me walking around the store, all trying to convince the customers to follow them to safety. The customers didn't know which one was real. Hell, sometimes I wasn't sure either. The thing had somehow absorbed my memories, my mannerisms, even the way I walked. It knew about my college classes, my work schedule, even personal things I'd never told anyone. "Trust me," one of the fake Tylers was saying to Mr. Peterson. "I know a way out through the loading dock." I tried to prove I was the real one. But what could I say that the creature didn't already know? Then the water started rising faster. Within minutes, it was up to our ankles, then our knees. The whole store was flooding, but there was nowhere for the water to come from. It defied physics. The creature was in its element now. I could see it swimming through the aisles, moving impossibly fast under the murky water. It was hunting us. Marcus went first. He was wading toward what he thought was the exit when something grabbed his legs and pulled him under. The water wasn't even 3 feet deep, but he disappeared completely. We never found his body. Mrs. Chen was next. She was holding onto a shopping cart for support when the thing surfaced right next to her. It had taken the form of her deceased husband. "Come with me, dear," it said in his voice. "I've been waiting for you." She knew it wasn't really him, but the voice was perfect. The mannerisms were perfect. For just a moment, she wanted to believe. That moment was enough. By the time dawn started breaking, it was just me and Mr. Peterson left, both of us standing on top of shopping carts with the water up to our chests. That's when I noticed something. Where the early morning light was coming through the windows, the water level was lower. The creature was avoiding those areas. "The windows," I shouted to Mr. Peterson. "It doesn't like sunlight." I started throwing cans of soup at the skylights above us. The glass shattered, letting in streams of natural light. Wherever the sunlight hit the water, it would recede, and the creature would retreat. I managed to break 3 more windows before the thing made its final move. It rose up out of the water in front of me, no longer bothering to disguise itself. Just this massive, wet, impossible thing with too many teeth and eyes that held way too much intelligence. But as the sunlight hit it directly, the creature started dissolving. Not disappearing, dissolving, like it was made of water itself. It let out this sound, like a drowning scream mixed with rushing water. Then it was gone. All of it, the creature, the flooding, everything just drained away through the floor. By the time the emergency crews arrived an hour later, the store looked normal except for some water damage. The official report blamed the flooding on burst pipes during the power outage. Nobody wanted to hear about shape-shifting creatures or impossible flooding. 3 people had died, 2 were missing, but that happens during severe weather emergencies. I quit the next day. Couldn't handle being in that store anymore. Every puddle, every reflection in a window, every voice calling my name, it all brought back that night. I work as a wilderness survival instructor now, specializing in water safety. I teach people about hypothermia, river crossings, flood survival, the practical stuff. But sometimes, when I'm teaching a class about water dangers, I find myself talking about things that aren't in any survival manual. About creatures that live in the water and can become anyone you trust. About voices that sound like people you love, calling you into dark water. Most people think I'm just being dramatic, adding local folklore to make the classes more interesting. That's fine. I'd rather they think I'm just a good storyteller than have them learn the truth the way I did. I still monitor the missing person reports around Fairbanks. Every winter, when the rivers freeze and people start working night shifts alone, a few folks disappear. The official reports always blame the weather, or accidents, or people just leaving town. But I know better, and someday, when someone comes to me with a story about hearing voices in the water, or seeing something that looks like someone they know calling them into the dark, I'll believe them. Because some things are still out there, waiting for the lights to go out and the water to rise,